Katakuri is easily one of my personal favorite characters in One Piece. Even from the little amount we actually saw the guy, up until his defeat, every scene and panel that was honored by his presence was completely taken over and overwhelmed in his shadow until his very last moments in battle with Luffy. His adversary in every aspect of his posture and being was there to grab everyone's attention at all times. Even subconsciously at points, where he was doing so while retaining an intense stoicism, strengthening his character build-up for later. All this was done without even saying a word. I focus slightly more on this, and why it's such a necessary build-up to such an extremely directed character, as far as why I love him as an overpowered adversary to our opponent, and as far as the brilliant yet subtle foreshadowing into what the future holds for him in a different series that I do that focuses on analyzing overpowered characters done right. Link in the description and at the end to my OP analysis on Katakuri that I made a couple months ago while he was, being all awesome in the manga. I'm telling you this because I don't want to delude you. This is taking place in my anime Decoded series, where I decode the more philosophical and inspirational metaphors behind characters rather than the character themselves on a more superficial wavelength. So that's in the other video. But there's an actual message in Katakuri's brief yet intense narrative that's really applicable to anyone. I believe that to be a subconscious core as to why we're all fascinated and why we all love him so much. This is why Katakuri is possibly my favorite antagonist in One Piece. Yes, an even greater villain than the feared terror commanding warlord, Captain Buggy. Oh, I just shit myself again thinking about him. Editor, clean up the shit. God, I love having an editor. Where was I? Ah yes, Katakuri. In order for anyone to fall in love with any character from any form of media, it must have one of two criteria. Either it's a character that contains some relatable flaw yet tries to move past it, or secondly, it's the opposite. It's a character that you wish to emulate because he does not have the flaws you possess. And the beautiful character writing that went into Katakuri pleaded to both of these strengths. To understand his metaphor, I believe we first need to glance at why he matters to us emotionally. Firstly, he comes off easily as a massive badass. He possessed a skill set we lack. With this power, he commands reverence and respect without even requiring the utterance of a word. His stoicism and his literal increasable foresight gives him all the makings of your perfect badass villain, honored without even demanding it, as well as a power set perfectly devised to be the bane of our beloved protagonist. He has all the traits of your perfect badass, yet somewhat cliche villain. His motives are seemingly extremely weak, as an agent of a Yonko, yet, still justified. But as anyone would agree, he's the star antagonist of the whole Cake Island arc. Yet still, he has the generic makeup of your typical One Piece lackey villain, categorized along with Cracker as one of the sweet commanders. And all of a sudden, all that crumbled. After pounding Luffy to oblivion, in a mere moment his entire facade was completely destroyed. No, not only to the viewers, but to his siblings and underlings as well. This is a complete turning point in Katakuri's character, and among the fan base, there were two reactions to this scene. He's a man, nothing more. Katakuri takes his respite and grabs some grub. The man who's so badass he looks down at the ground beneath his feet, and who's regarded as a god among men in the ranks of his big mom's empire, is then exposed for what he really is. The first reaction was from the ones rooting for Luffy, genuinely prideful at what just took place, and then there were the ones rooting for Katakuri, myself included, shamefully so, that were honestly kinda let down by the sudden transformation of his character. Yeah, but little did I know, this character transformation was his character's greatest. That's what made him go from one of my favorite villains in One Piece to possibly my favorite villain in One Piece. The obvious story here is that it takes a lifetime to build a reputation, but it only takes a moment to destroy. This is the complete and utter verity in everyone's everyday life. And this is what clearly happened to Katakuri. And yes, while that's great and I loved it, it is totally not the lesson to be learned from him in his entirety. Unlike a brief moment where someone screws up and destroys everything they've built, this wasn't Katakuri screwing up. This was, from Luffy's perspective, a powerful advancement against his putting passion in his eyes to seize victory. But for Katakuri, this wasn't him doing a flawed act that gave people the wrong perception of his person. This was him being himself. Except this time, someone was watching. He was strangely less upset at Luffy for revealing who he truly was than he was upset at himself for being who he truly was. And this is where I would like to talk about how he only then developed the passion to defeat Luffy, he only then was eager to take out witnesses, but I already made that video defining his character, as well as his future, that was being subtly foreshadowed in his character building, as well as the insane importance to him stabbing himself with that spear. But regarding all that, link again is in the description. But from here on out, we will be moving slightly away from character analysis territory and move more into the inspiration that hit me in the philosophy of his character. Possibly harder than even the philosophy of Usopp's that I've made every part of me and cherish in my everyday life. If you keep spewing constant bullshit, eventually someone will believe you in something. And then they'll treat you like a god. Powerful stuff, powerful stuff. But moving on, remember what I said about the two types of character archetypes that really make the fan base fall in love with them? Until this point, I loved him like a type 2 character, the total stoic badass I want to emulate. At least to an extent, I mean, you know. But once I've reached this turning point in his tale, all of a sudden, I started loving him like a type 1 character. A flawed character with flaws I can relate to and see applied to myself. But most importantly, he isn't shed in a happy light. A light of self-improvement to evolve from his issues and work past them, trying to turn his weaknesses into strengths like we see in your average type 1 good guys. For example, the Straw Hats. They all have their sights set forward, each with a massive trauma in their respective pasts, yet they join together to move past all that. Deku is powerless in his society, yet continues to push himself forward towards his dream, and I use him as an example to contrast Todoroki, another character that starts off as a type 2 badass, but by the end of the tournament has the perspective of a complete type 1 character. And that development resulted him as my favorite student in My Hero Academia. Finally stepping away from the shadow of his past, making his weaknesses his strengths, and conquering what he was running away from his entire life, Katakuri also becomes a type 1 character midway through his fight. But the difference between him and Todoroki is that Todoroki was a type 2 badass that Deku transformed into a type 1 inspiration, while Katakuri was always a type 1 character, but he lives his life masking and hiding his type 1 aspect and only revealing himself as a type 2 stoic badass. He's never seen lie down, never seen eat, never seen smile. Katakuri spends his entire life running away from himself. We don't need the tragic flashbacks to know that. Luffy's someone that believes in freedom and truth above all else, which makes him one of the most morally fascinating shonen protagonists of all time. So of course, none of this fazed him. On the contrary, it seemed throughout the fight that Luffy was fighting against the evolved version of himself. In retrospect, if we take a glance at this battle from Katakuri's perspective, emotionally saw Luffy as the evolved version of himself as well. Physically, Katakuri had everything on top of Luffy, but his one ultimate weakness was Luffy's greatest strength. Luffy lived a life disregarding how others saw him, becoming the freest man on the sea, where the things he does are to mold the world to fit himself, as opposed to Katakuri, who continuously molded himself to fit the world, growing into a person that wasn't himself, where he didn't belong even in his own body. He lived every moment of his life in the ultimate crushing loneliness of wearing a constant mask that he dare not remove. I pointed the following out in my analysis of his character. How in the beginning of his battle against Luffy, every time he knocked him down, he used that moment to his advantage to try to finish him off then and there. But after his true identity was uncovered, every time he would knock Luffy down, he would taunt and urge him to rise back up and take a stand. In my analysis video, I expressed how this defined his character and how it defines who he truly is, as well as what he will do in the future of One Piece. But on the metaphoric level, this is the ideals of Katakuri clashing against Luffy's. Katakuri's entrapment versus Luffy's freedom. For Katakuri, this is a fight that wasn't about winning anymore. He was looking at a weaker version of himself constantly getting back up no matter how bloody he got and no matter how terribly he was pulverized moments before. He was against a weaker opponent who with sheer will got back to his feet only to be further humiliated and pummeled back to the ground once more. The first half of the fight for Katakuri was a clash of might, and he'll take every chance to win. But the second half of this fight was a battle of ideals, and will only be victorious when Luffy admits defeat, where Luffy no longer gets back up, and where Luffy succumbs to his opponent, proving that his ideology means nothing. Katakuri stabbing himself to even the fight on an analytical level was brilliant, but on a philosophical level, the only way he can win an ideological battle is through this fair fight. When Luffy says to him, "We're pirates, we don't need to play fair," because in his steadfast mindset and unwavering ideology, it was completely unnecessary for Katakuri to do that. And that's why Katakuri lost his constant barrage of overpowered attacks. He fell to the off-limits ground. Mask shattered and he could no longer get up. His facade is gone, and with it went the will to fight he was pretending to possess. That's the philosophy of Katakuri. Being yourself is your full potential, and running away from yourself, masking yourself with foreign identities, is walking into a world of self-hurt that can only get worse. when that mask is finally removed, Luffy's role in One Piece is being the ultimate liberator. And I'm working on a whole video on that, Makings of a King Luffy. I like that video. But you'll be seeing it soon. And that's why he's the perfect candidate to become the Pirate King. And that's why next time we see Katakuri, in the fashion I predicted in the analysis video, he'll be far more powerful than he was at this point, and he will greet us with a wide smile, no longer needing his scarf. Fighting with Luffy will teach Katakuri to embrace himself. It's the genius of Katakuri's development, but that's the genius for who Luffy is as well. For another take on Katakuri, I will link Craft Dwarf's video in the description on Bonds Beyond Blood, a 30-minute One Piece analysis that's really awesome. Link to it will be in the description as well, and he covers Katakuri too. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Send my regards in the comments. That would be sick. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, fanbase. I hope you enjoyed. If y'all want more One Piece content or more anime decoded videos, it would be my greatest honor if you'd subscribble and let me know in the comments. Feel free to leave a like to leave more likes and hit the bell to subscribble, because subscribing doesn't subscribe anymore. Bells subscribe. Subscribing is more like considering to subscribe. It's a cool process we have here on YouTube. Feels good to finally be making some One Piece content. I love One Piece, and I look forward to making more. Thank you for all the support. Link to my merch and Patreon is in the description. Special thanks to the patrons that support me there: Coggers, Q, Tyler Shoemaker, Zindergarten, Axel, Colton, Scott, and an anonymous member, the 2 Lord Tweakers, Gavin Anderson, and Large Blab, and the 4 Godusop Rank, Zachary Wheatley, Dark Element, JD Fincher, and Ezedric. You guys are super helping the channel. You have no idea. Anyone who becomes a Patreon is welcome to join the Discord, where I'm active. And to anyone watching that isn't supporting the channel, your watching is supporting the channel. So thank you all too. In society, it's very important that everyone has to look the part. Everyone has to be the same and look the same. But to fit the theme of this analysis, you be you, fam. And remember, stay weird, fam.